Assalamualaikum. My name is Siti Nakuya binti Muhammad Shafi'i from AS 1202D. In this video, I'm going to present about fermentation and yeast. I'm going to discuss the question in the following slide. First thing is the chemical process needed to make wine. The chemical process needed to make wine is fermentation. During this process, glucose molecules interact with yeast culture in order to make ethanol and carbon dioxide. Grapes contains a lot of carbohydrate, especially maltose. Maltose is a disaccharide composed of two molecules of glucose. This maltose will act upon the yeast and produce the ethanol. There is one molecule of glucose that undergoes the process of glycolysis, which lead to two molecules of pyruvate. And after that, the pyruvate will act upon the alcohol dehydrogenase to form two molecules of ethanol and two molecules of carbon dioxide. Hence, we can see the bubble coming out of the solution. When the alcohol concentration reach between 13% to 15%, yeast will die. For the second question, why did George tell Stanley that the winemaking process require a fresh yeast culture? This is because the fresh yeast has a better ability to metabolize the glucose and yield the amount of ethanol necessary to fully ferment the grape juice and the necessary level of ethanol. For this next slide, the question is, was the yeast that Stanley used living or non-living? The answer is yes. The yeast that Stanley used was living. If the yeast was non-living, it would not have been able to metabolize the sugar within the grape juice. This is because on top of the glass showed that the bubble, which is carbon dioxide, was produced, and this also showed that the yeast is able to metabolize. Next is how the yeast and bacteria are different. This is because yeast is a unicellular eukaryote that has a formed nucleus, while bacteria are prokaryotic and have no formed nucleus in it. Next is, why will contaminating bacteria make the wine sour while pure yeast will not? And the answer for this question is, bacteria can make the wine sour, but the yeast will not make it sour. In presence of air, yeast can grow, but in absence of air, the alcohol will be produced, or known as fermentation. Even if it's a closed container, certain contamination with bacteria can convert pyruvate to acetic acid instead of alcohol, and this will make it sour to the alcohol. That is why contamination of bacteria will make it taste sour. For this next slide, the question is, what is the difference between an obligate anaerobe and facultative anaerobe? Which kind of organism is yeast? For obligate anaerobe are organisms that can only survive in presence of oxygen and are poisoned by the absence of oxygen. And next is obligate anaerobe, the organism that can only survive in absence of oxygen and is poisoned by the presence of oxygen. Clostridium is a bacteria of the genus that can be the example. And lastly is a facultative anaerobe, in which the organism respire anaerobically in absence of oxygen and also anaerobically in the presence of oxygen. And from this yeast is a facultative anaerobe. Lastly, why didn't Stanley make any wine? This is because Stanley did not cut off his grape juice and let his mixture in the open air. He did not make any wine. As a result, yeast use the oxygen in the air to produce water and carbon dioxide rather than ethanol and carbon dioxide. These are my references for this presentation. We have come to the end of the video. That is all for me. Thank you for watching and have a great day. Assalamualaikum.